moment one of them let slip something he had absolutely no way of knowing, everything she thought she understood about that night shifted into something far more dangerous. 3 true late-night predator horror stories. Story 1. I'm 23 and I live alone. One of my outlets had basically exploded, and for a while I'd been dealing with the power cutting off randomly and a smell of smoke that came and went. I was genuinely afraid a fire would start while I was sleeping. I sent pictures of the burnt outlet to my dad, since he's the one who handles communication with my landlord and deals with payments. I never talked to the landlord directly, so I was already put off when he called me himself. He said he could send someone right away, but then added, "The electrician is scared of the stairs because he's quite old. Can you go out and help him? He lives in the building next door." I figured the landlord was just being cheap and didn't want to pay a real professional, so he called a buddy instead. But the outlet situation felt like an emergency to me, and he had already delayed fixing it once before, so I said fine. He gave me the guy's phone number and told me to call and schedule it myself. About an hour later, I was downstairs meeting a 70-year-old retired electrician who was shaky on his feet but otherwise standing okay. I carried his bag while he held the handrail with both hands on the way up. Once we were inside my apartment, he sat down and said he needed a moment. He started talking about his health, then told me he was all alone and needed, and I'm quoting him here, "someone to come in once a week to cook and clean. I don't even need sex. I don't need anything. I will pay." He said I should find him someone like that. I told him I didn't know anyone, but he kept pushing and repeated the same thing 3 or 4 times. At some point while he was walking around, he grabbed my hand and kissed it, saying, "Don't be scared of me." I told him I wasn't, that I just liked my personal space. I had met older people before who did the hand-kissing thing as a kind of old-fashioned gesture, so I tried to let it go. But then he brought up the cook and clean arrangement again, and that's when I started to get actually concerned. I wanted to ask him to leave, but I realized I would still have to walk him back downstairs, and in my head that defeated the point of getting away from him quickly. I should have trusted that feeling. While he was checking the outlet, he mentioned he had been in this apartment years ago to replace some cables. He said he knew the layout of the whole building. Then he casually said, "I even have the keys to this apartment, but don't worry," and started fake patting his pockets, then said the keys were probably in some box at home. I pretended to be fine with that. I didn't say anything. I just let him talk and nodded along. Finally, it was time for him to go. He was standing in front of the door with me right behind him. He picked up his little bag, I took it from him, and he kissed my hand again. Then he turned to kiss my cheeks goodbye, which I let happen because he was literally blocking the door and I figured he'd move after. He grabbed the wall for support, shifted maybe 30 centimeters toward the door, then stopped and turned back around. He grabbed my face with both hands and leaned in. I remember thinking there was no way he was actually doing this. I pushed his face away with my free hand. He mumbled, "You are a nice girl anyway." Once we were outside, he told me one more time, "Remember what I told you. Find me a woman that cooks and cleans, no sex, no nothing." I didn't respond. Before anyone says I was stupid for letting a stranger in, I know and I agree. I am one of the most cautious people I know, and I'm usually told I'm too guarded. I had never let a stranger into my home before this. Not even longtime friends of my parents if I didn't personally know them. I always told my mom, "You know them, I don't. A stranger is a stranger." I felt pressured by the calls to just accept it, and honestly, I was more afraid of a fire than I was of an unfamiliar person. I wanted to yell at him, but watching him move that slowly made it complicated, because I was actually worried he might fall or have a heart attack if I startled him. I've pushed back on pushy men before without any trouble, but I had never been in a situation where I was also worried about what would happen if the person harassing me got hurt. It was a strange thing to have to think about, and I regret letting things slide as much as I did. There are a few things I forgot to mention. Before he arrived, I realized how strange the whole setup was and called my mom. I explained what the landlord had said and who I was waiting on. She stayed on the call when I first met him, and I told her I'd call back after. He didn't know who I had been talking to. I kept my phone in my hand the entire time. I almost called someone in the first few minutes once he started talking, but he hadn't said anything bad enough yet, and I thought I might be overreacting. I also want to mention that before he came over, knowing he needed to check an outlet in the kitchen, I hid everything sharp I could think of. It sounds strange given that I still let him in, but it made me feel better. My landlord told me afterward that the old man doesn't have the keys, that he took them back a long time ago. That might be true, but I'm not taking anyone's word for it. It's not safe to. Story 2. This happened about 3 years ago, back when I was working nights, and my whole life was basically flipped upside down from everyone else's schedule. I was 31, working as a bartender on the night shift, which meant I slept through most of the day and was wide awake while the rest of the world was out cold. It sounds weird, but after a while you just get used to it. That's your normal. The sun goes down and you feel like it's the start of your day. Around that same time I had totaled my car, so I didn't have a vehicle. I was getting around entirely on foot. That sounds worse than it was, honestly. I lived maybe a 10-minute walk from the gas station up the street, and this gas station had slot machines, which, when you're nocturnal and off the clock, becomes your social spot. I'd go up there with friends, play the machines, just hang out. I'd lived in that area since I was 14, so I knew the neighborhood well. It had a decent crime rate, I won't pretend it didn't, but I never really felt like I was in danger just walking around. I'd done it 100 times. I'm also a small woman, 5'2", and Georgia allows open carry, so I carried a .38 revolver in a holster. It just made sense to me. I'm not going to apologize for it. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, and I mean that. So on this particular night I had stayed pretty late at the gas station. By around 3:30 in the morning, I finally decided to head home. When I stepped outside, I had two options for getting there. I could go left, which was the longer route but had more streetlights, or I could go straight, which was darker but knocked a couple minutes off the walk. I stood there for a second thinking about it, and I just went straight. I had my gun. Either direction felt fine to me. A smarter version of me would have walked that route quietly, paying attention to everything around her. But I was comfortable. I had music going through my earbuds, and I wasn't really thinking about much. I was just strolling home the way I had 100 times before. The road I was on branches off a main road. It's a real street with houses lined up on both sides, a couple of neighborhood entrances feeding into it, sidewalks the whole way. Not a back alley or anything, just a regular residential street that happened to be pretty dark that time of night. I was about halfway down when I looked down at my phone trying to pick the next song. I was scrolling through, not really paying attention to anything in front of me. I finally just picked something at random and looked up. There was a man standing on the sidewalk, about 15 feet ahead of me. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, and he was standing right at the edge of the sidewalk where it meets the street, just next to someone's meal box. Hood up, just standing there, completely still, on this dark street at 3:30 in the morning. I stopped walking immediately and locked my phone. Music off. I stood there for a second trying to make sense of it. Maybe he lived there and was grabbing his mail late. Maybe he was just another night owl who happened to be outside. I was trying to give him every normal explanation I could think of. So I let out a little nervous laugh and said, "Whoa, you startled me." He didn't say anything back. He just stared at me. And then he shrugged his shoulders and started walking toward me without a single word. I took 2 steps back. Loud and clear I said, "Don't get shot now." And honestly, the way I said it was almost jokey, because part of me was still thinking, no, this isn't actually happening. This man is not seriously doing this. But he was. He paused for just a moment, and then kept coming toward me. He clearly thought I was bluffing. I gave him one more warning. That was it. I pulled my gnome. 38 from the holster and held it steady and practically yelled, "You think I'm freaking around?" He stopped. He looked at my hands, and then he turned around and walked the other way. I walked the rest of the way home almost completely backwards, watching the street behind me the whole time. I wasn't taking any chances. I genuinely believed that if I hadn't had that gun on me, something really awful would have happened that night. I don't say that for drama. I say it because of the way he moved toward me, the way he said nothing, the way he only stopped when he saw the weapon. That wasn't someone out for a late-night stroll. Now, writing all that out reminded me of a second incident that happened a little while after. On that other route home, the more lit one, same kind of setup. Late at night, walking home with music in, I came to a spot under a street light, and out of nowhere this teenager came running up to me, clearly drunk, doing some weird dance, asking what I was listening to and where I was going. I kept it simple. I told him it was late and he shouldn't be running up on women like that. I said I was going home and to leave me alone. He called me a name and jogged back to his driveway where a few of his friends were hanging around. I kept walking, and then I heard something hit the pavement near me. Then again, I turned around and saw rocks landing just behind me, then off to the side, close enough that it wasn't just messing around. These kids were actually throwing rocks at me. I was done being calm at that point. I turned around and shouted, "You realize you're throwing rocks at someone carrying a gun?" Silence. No more rocks. I really do hope that stuck with them. I hope the next time any of those kids thought about harassing somebody walking alone at night, they remembered that moment. Because it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, day or night. You don't know who you're dealing with. I'm not here to argue about guns. I know some people hate them, and that's fine. I respect that. But I can tell you that I'm sitting here writing this, and I'm glad I had mine. Story 3. This happened back when I was in my early 20s. I was taking a college prep night course, one of those evening classes that runs until pretty late, and I had made a small group of friends there the way you do when you keep seeing the same people every week. One of them, a guy in his early to mid-20s, had started driving me to and from class. It was just convenient. He lived nearby. We were going to the same place, and it saved me from having to figure out a ride every single time. He seemed genuinely nice, normal. We talked during the drives about class stuff, random things, nothing weird. He never made me uncomfortable, and he never made any kind of move on me, which I actually respected because I had a boyfriend and he knew it. I had been upfront about that from the start, and he never pushed anything or made it awkward. As far as I could tell, he was just a decent person being a decent friend. I even tried to set him up with my best friend at one point because I thought they might click. So my boyfriend had met him. We had all hung out together a few times. It was casual and friendly. The only thing that came out of that was that he seemed a little too eager to rush things with her physically, more than she was comfortable with. She mentioned it to me and I noted it, but I kind of filed it away as just being a bit socially off rather than something that should have changed how I felt about riding with him. Looking back, I probably should have paid more attention to that. So one night after class, he was driving me home like usual. It was between 11 and 11:30 at night. The route home takes you past some pretty remote stretches, areas near woods where people go hiking during the day. But at that hour, there is nobody out there. No lights, no houses close by, just dark trees on both sides of the road. He pulled off to the side of the road and stopped the car right in one of those spots. I looked around and I didn't see any reason for him to stop. No mechanical issue, nothing wrong that I could tell. I asked him what he was doing and he said very casually, "Let's go for a walk in the woods. I want to be clear about what that felt like." It was almost 11:30 at night. We were on a dark road next to a wooded area with no one else around, and he wanted to go for a walk in the woods. I kept my voice steady and told him no thank you, that my boyfriend was expecting me home, and that it was very late. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked frustrated, not embarrassed, not like someone who had made a weird suggestion and realized it. Frustrated, like things were not going the way he had planned. He started the car back up after a few minutes of just sitting there. Those few minutes felt long. I was watching him, watching the road, keeping my breathing even, not wanting to do anything that would change the energy in that car. We drove for a bit, and then he pulled into a grocery store parking lot. The store was closed, the lot was empty. The lights over the entrance were off. He got out of the car and walked away from it and made a phone call. I don't know who he called. I don't know what was said. But the second he was out of the car, I had my phone in my hands and I was texting my best friend. I told her who I was with, where I was, what had happened so far, and I told her that if she did not hear from me within 30 minutes to call the police. I sent it, and I watched him pacing around outside the car while he talked on the phone. He got back in, and then he asked me to move to the back seat. I told him no. I told him to take me home. He got back out of the car again. He walked around behind it and paced back and forth for a few minutes. I could see him in the side mirror. I sat completely still in the passenger seat, and I thought about getting out and running. But when I looked around, there was nothing. Closed businesses in every direction. No lights on anywhere, no people. I was in a spot where getting out of the car might have made things worse instead of better, so I stayed. I don't fully understand why, even now. Fear does something to your decision-making that's hard to explain unless you've been in it. He got back in the car. He started it, and he drove me home. He didn't say much on the rest of the drive, and neither did I. When he pulled up and I got out, I just went straight inside. Once I was in and the door was closed behind me, I messaged my best friend right away to let her know I was safe. Then I messaged him. I told him I would be finding my own way to and from school from then on, that I didn't appreciate what he had done, and that he was not to contact me anymore. He did leave me alone after that, though he did try to send an apology first. I told him again to just leave me alone, and that was the end of it. I think about that night sometimes, and I genuinely feel like I got lucky. Whatever he had in mind when he pulled over on that dark road, whatever that phone call was about, something made him stop. I don't know what, but I really feel like I dodged something that could have been a lot worse than just a scary car ride.